Every now and then, I speak with a parent whose story just stops me in my tracks. Not because it's perfect, but because it's so real and raw. And today's guest is one of those parents, and she has been through the late nights. She has been through the tears and all of those moments of wondering if anything would ever work. But she kept going, and what unfolded changed everything for her child, for her whole family. And so if you're listening right now and you're feeling stuck or discouraged, this episode is for you. You'll hear firsthand what it looks like to move from that survival mode to true progress, the feeling of that, and how it doesn't have to be all or nothing to start making a difference. Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. I am so incredibly excited to welcome Tiffany to the podcast today. Tiffany, I am so excited that you're here. I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Hi, Donna. I am very excited to be on here. So thank you for letting me join the podcast today. Very excited to share my story and give you some information about our family and how we started with the program.
Tiffany, I was so grateful when you reached out and wanted to share your story, because I know how lonely it can feel, and how isolating it is when you have a child that's struggling. I mean, if I think back to when I was going through this with my son, I felt like I was just on this island by myself.
I
So,
agree. Yeah.
yeah. And so to be able to share that story with other families out there, I just hope it just gives at least one family that comfort and that hope that it is possible for their child with ADHD to thrive. And you said that to me before we started, recording, and that really sort of just hit home, because this is why we're here. This is why we do what we do. Parenting a child with ADHD, it comes with so many emotions, so much frustration and exhaustion, but also guilt. Can you just take listeners back to, what life looked like before this journey? What were your biggest struggles?
Sure. And I do agree with what you just said is that thank you for allowing us to thrive with ADHD instead of deal with it, because you're not really dealing with it. You want to learn to thrive with your ADHD. Nobody should be ashamed to say, I have ADHD. And before we were like, how do we handle this diagnosis and not get rid of it, but put a Band-Aid on it? And we didn't do that. We still have ADHD and we're thriving in our ADHD. So to get back to our story, a lot of the biggest struggles, I think, with a lot of people that might kind of feel the same way that we do is controlling and communicating emotions, sensory processing, delays, and trying to understand what their needs are. The impulsivity is probably very heavy on a lot of people, being able to control a lot of their behavior when they need to communicate with something. Dysregulation is another word that comes into play. And we're not understanding how to help them. Just for reference, our son started walking at 9.5 months old.
Wow.
So he was ready to go very young. And I would say by 18 months old, we started noticing signs, which is so silly to say at this time, but my husband and I will look back and be like, at 18 months old, we were, I want to say, quote unquote, observing him with friends, observing him with our friends' kids. And we were just like, he's a little much. He's got a lot of energy, and you go to pediatrician appointments and you go to doctors, and they were like, he's just a boy with a lot of energy. And you get to a point where you're like, Yeah, but we're just not settling down and we can't. I feel like the things that our friends were doing, it wasn't working for us. So we thought very young age we noticed some signs that we were unsure of. So now looking back, the behavior, I guess, with the ADHD and anxiety didn't really start amping up until about kindergarten, is when I think a lot of people start noticing those signs.
And what did that look like inside your family life?
We didn't, I would say it was hard because I felt like we lost friends. We started not going out as much. You know, nobody wants to take a little one to the restaurant at that age, anyways, but also just afraid of what other people might think. As much as we felt we might get judged, we were judging ourselves as parents, that people were going to look at us and say, you know, get your child in control and, you know, throwing electronics at them. And we just felt like we needed to seclude ourselves for a long amount of time until we figured out what we could do to help him so he could just sit, which no little kid can really sit, but we just felt like there was something a little bit different. It was like walking on eggshells for an extremely long period of time. And I'm like, when is this ever going to get better? And we're like, the older he gets, it'll get better. And it never did. It got worse to a point of, you know, to our next topic is medication. You know, we were like, what do we do? And we felt like that was our only option that we were given at the time
And so,
because he's going to get kicked out of school. He can't manage in a classroom, and I wasn't in a place to homeschool him, nor did I think that that was a good fit for him. So what do you do that you felt like you needed a quick fix? And we felt like medication was going to be our magical pill, right? As you say, something like that. Yeah.
yeah,
We
I
were
mean,
looking for
are you
that
telling my
quick.
story? Definitely sounds like you're telling my exact story of exactly the same as us. In you know, he's just a boy and being dismissed, and then is it me? Is it something that I'm doing as a parent that, you know, is causing this? What was just everyday life like with him at home before you went down, you know, that path?
So a lot of times, like, so we have a daughter as well that's 22, they're 22 months apart. So obviously differences in the children, but I would say just simple, easy tasks like getting to bed, um, getting on a routine, even if we had the strictest routine for him, was super difficult. Transitions, just, all right, guys, we got to get in the car. We're going to grandma's house. And it was like he's on the floor wailing like crazy, and we didn't know what it was, but it was like he doesn't do well with transitions. There was no warning for him. So I felt like he was like dying inside, and then we were dying inside because, you know, at 5 years old, you would think that he can tell us something, but he couldn't. I felt like he was nonverbal, even though he was verbal. So lots of, I would say, my husband and I would, you know, there's arguments with us as parents because now one parent's blaming the other parent. Um, you know, your marriage starts to go when you're just constantly feeling like both of you are to blame. Losing friends, family thinking that like, well, why is he always doing this and why is he always doing that? Why don't you guys try this? Why don't you guys try that? And I'm like, don't you think that we're doing everything that we can? So like I said, it was a lot of eggshells around the house, lots of fighting, because at the end of the day, when you have ADHD, you're extremely impulsive, and his name was getting called out so many more times than our daughter's name was getting called out. So the shame was just there at a very early age. And we didn't know that until we started working with Ashley. But his shame was so high only because we were like, stop that, stop doing that, go here, sit here. You can't really discipline and punish an ADHD child. And we didn't know how to really parent them either, more or less be just a normal parent with a child that has maybe anxiety and ADHD. So we were just kind of along for the ride, and it was a rough one. It was a rough one for a couple of years.
Yeah, I feel every emotion in what you just said, and I'm sure that there are so many parents out there listening today thinking, this
When
is
is it going to get better?
when is
Yeah.
it going to get better? When is it going to get better? And it sounds like you had tried all of these things, but nothing seemed to work. And so, what was that moment? that made you think, I can't keep doing this,
Yeah.
something has to change?
So we had a very big wake up call, which I think you're very similar to. In kindergarten, we decided to try our first dose of medication. I believe we started on ADHD medication, and they also knew he had anxiety. So we started with the ADHD medication for a couple of weeks, I think up to 2 months. And then they said, okay, let's start the anxiety medication. Very early on, we noticed like increase of anger and aggression. But even though we had doubts, oh, we just have to increase it until we get to a level. And we would get to a level and we would be like, oh, we're good. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, now we're hitting again. Oh, we just have to increase again. Donna, when I tell you that, we did that for 2 years, 2.5 years. We rode that roller coaster of medication. And I tell you that I can't believe we did it for that long because we're waiting for that right amount of dose. We're waiting for that calmness in him. We're waiting for him to be happy. And he became very sad, depressed. Our happy baby was gone. Like he just, even though he was like had ADHD, he was like a happy little guy, but he was like a little all over the place. But now we like lost our kid. Um, so our breaking point was pretty much he started second grade, and from the moment he started, the anxiety in the classroom hit. He was like ripping stuff off the walls. He was couldn't sit in his seat. He kept running out of the classroom, just like out of body experience, out of sensory experience. And I mean, a lot went on other than that. But to keep it short, we ended up, they kind of told us, like, we don't know if we can like keep him in the public school because of a safety concern. And I was like, I feel like the medication's doing this. Like he wasn't doing these behaviors before. And they were like, I don't know what to tell you, but we can't continue on. We felt like we had nothing else to do but research, and we found I think they're called like I'm not going to say the name of the school, but it was like um, a mental health center for adolescents. And it was pretty much more for like a medication management. And his psychiatrist at the time referred us to this place that took our insurance. It was downtown in the city of Chicago. It's a drive for us to get there, obviously, and he was there all day, so I had to stay there all day. And so we decided to take him out of school and go here thinking that this was like the best direction for him. We tried a couple different changes in the meds, and it wasn't going well. Finally, they decided to try him on like a third medication, an antipsychotic medication, and that didn't go well. And he pretty much overdosed on the medication, ended up having to call 911. Was admitted into Lurie's Children's Hospital for high levels of like his hormone level was so high. They didn't have to pump him of anything like that, but he did have an IV for a while. And we were like, what's happening? I don't understand. So when the hospital told us what they found in his bloodstream and that they felt like he was on like extremely high doses of anxiety medication and antipsychotic medication for a 6-year-old or 7 at the time, or 8-year-old, was daunting to me because I said, well, we were sent here because he was at a center that was supposed to help with medication management, and they were blown away by his levels. His hormone levels were so high, that his blood pressure was high, like everything just was. So we ended up having to stay there until his levels calmed down. But with that came a social worker and child protective services, because thinking like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And what is the reason behind it? So we felt attacked that we tried to do everything for our son, and now he ends up here and we're the ones being targeted. Thank God for them, because they did listen to us and hear our story, but they would not let us leave the hospital until we had a plan in place. And I said right then and there, I said, I don't know what's doing this to him, but I'm done. We are no longer being on medication, but I know 100% that I can't just take him off. I need to know how I wean him off these medications and how do we move on. So we decided to take him out of school and homeschool him and work with a psychiatrist to wean him off medication. Now, his psychiatrist wasn't happy with that plan. She's like, I feel like you're going to end up, having some difficult times there. And I said, I don't care. I need to start from scratch. He's been on medication since kindergarten. I'm not saying he'll never be on meds again, but we need to start from scratch. So we ended up slowly during all of winter break. He stayed home. We homeschooled. He does have an IEP, so we were able to get tutors coming over at certain times of the day to help give him a little bit of education. So mom wasn't doing it the entire time because I was doing it in the mornings and then I had to work and then I would do it in the evenings with him. Um, so we did that until he was completely weaned off. During this time, we were like, how is he going to go back to school once he's off meds? How do we make this work? Can he be in a special ed room? Does he need to go to a special school? And during winter break, I think I signed up with you in December 5th of 2023. And you're desperate. You're like, what is our next step? And I'm telling you, I came across something on the internet. I told my husband, I said, you have got to listen to this woman's story. And he did not bat an eye. And he was like, let's do this. I said, I'm going to call and find out what it is. And I said, I don't care what it takes for us to do this. I know that whatever we are doing isn't working and I don't have any other place to go. And if it doesn't work, at least we tried. It's something else that, and I think that's what's really hard for people is to come out of their comfort zone. But I have never had to advocate so bad for our son until it came to this point when he's in the emergency room and looking at me like, Mommy, what's wrong? Because he was probably had all these drugs inside of him and things happening to him that he didn't realize. And I felt like that was my fault. Here's the guilt. And I'm never going to do that to him again. And I'm not to say that medicine doesn't work for people because we have friends that use it and things are fine. I think that we just went on a different path and it didn't work for us and we needed a different revenue and never, no doctor, no therapist gave us any other recommendations than let's just try medication. So we're very grateful to be here and we're grateful that the hospital was able to help us through because things could have went in a different direction that day.
Thank you for being so open and vulnerable and sharing that story. I felt every moment of that. I've got goosebumps all up and down my body. You're so brave to sit here today and share that story.
And I think there's a
And
lot of people just within the program that I met that never got to the point of the medication. And I hope that I was glad that they found you because I'm like, if you could alleviate that process and not go through that pain, because I mean, you guys were on three, like wanting to get on 3 or 4 different medications to help with the side effects. And if you could just steer a family in a different direction to try before the medication, I just advocate for people to at least try anything else then, because a child cannot tell you how they feel on these medications. They can't communicate to begin with on their emotions, and then we're giving them a medication and we're trying to ask them how they feel on it, and they can't tell you that.
you're 100% right there. And I know that your story has probably touched multiple listeners today in just sharing that. So thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Did you have any reservations or hesitations before taking this first step away from the conventional approach? Looking back, what what were those hesitations, or if any, or were you just like all in?
Yeah. Um, my husband and I were talking about this, and we felt like we were all in. Um, I think some of the things that I, excuse me, pointed out was, is it too good to be true?
Mm.
Um, how did this woman change their lives? How could this work? And, are we going to fail again? Possibility of failure as a parent to put him through another trial of things, changing foods, diet, exercise, supplements, vitamins, all of those things. Um, how long is this all going to take? Are we down this road for another 2 years and then we're not going to see improvement? We knew it wasn't going to be easy, but we kind of felt like we had to trust you and trust your process. And read some of the testimonials and hear other stories. And we listen to so many of your podcast of other listeners just like me that got on here and was vulnerable. And I really listened to those stories and those parents that shared. And I thought, these are real people. And we're taking a chance. And we felt like if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this all the way through. And that way, if it doesn't work, at least we say we tried. I would say one of the hardest parts was adapting these lifestyles into our whole family. Our daughter's probably the hardest. She wasn't end up being like 100% gluten and dairy free. In the beginning, she was, but it's hard because she's used to a different lifestyle. Like he knew a little bit of why we were changing things, but she's like, well, I don't have to change, so I'm not going to do it. But it wasn't, I guess for us, it wasn't that we were starting a diet. We weren't starting a new routine. We are a lifestyle change. This is a lifestyle change. And that's what we had to say is that we're not doing this for a couple of months for a quick temporary fix, which I loved because we did see a lot of programs that were like, oh, try these. And I practically read your book before I even started the program. And I was like, oh, anybody can eliminate dairy, gluten, soy, but it's not just that. There is so much more in between. And we didn't even know the detox that he had to go through, the tests that he took, and the reports that came back with things that were the parasites, the sensitivity to foods. I mean, we had no idea. And even just taking out the food sensitivities, we saw a drastic improvement. Who knew that he had peanut butter sandwiches every single day and he had a highest sensitivity to peanut butter? Was that the only corporate? No. But I just stress to people that it isn't just one thing. There's things that you need to take the time and work into it. So we went all in, and I would say you can't just if you're going to just do this halfway, you're going to get halfway results, and so you got to go all in.
I just got off the phone with the mother of a child whose ADHD is out of control. This mother feels so guilty not being able to help him, and it's heartbreaking, especially because I know it doesn't have to be this hard. ADHD does not have to dictate the mood of your entire family. Most of the time, when a child is diagnosed with ADHD, only one treatment option is provided: medication. I'm not against medication, but if that medication doesn't work and the next step is just another pill to address the side effects of the first, and then another, there's got to be a better way. A way that doesn't just address symptoms, but instead looks at underlying stresses in the body that are actually creating and exacerbating those symptoms in the first place. It's my mission in life to help families reduce ADHD symptoms naturally without medication. After helping my own son completely reduce his ADHD symptoms and now helping over 1,000 other families, now I want to teach you these strategies as well. I have put it all together in a free ADHD fast class, or maybe you would say, if you're in America, fast class. In less than 20 minutes, you can discover my proven 3-step process to reduce ADHD symptoms naturally, sometimes in as little as 30 days. Look for the link to join this free fast class in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. Though I think the tests are pivotal, because these symptoms that our kids are experiencing are a cry for help. It is an underlying biological overwhelm that's going on in their body. And so it isn't just changing the diet. It isn't just going for a parasite. It isn't just optimizing detoxification when our kids are melting down and when our kids are not focusing on school at all, or they're bouncing off the walls. It's not just ADHD and something that we need to accept.
Yes.
There is things that are driving and exacerbating those ADHD symptoms. And I mean, your son is a perfect example of what his body was calling out to you, and you took that leap of faith. And just to watch your journey and to hear your story, this is why I have this podcast. This is why I do what I do, because I've been through it myself. I see these stories every single day, and a family out there that is struggling with ADHD symptoms does not need to struggle. And there is something that can help. And Tiffany, you are part of spreading that message out there. And again, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you are doing this and being so open and vulnerable. Now, you said when you took out peanut butter, it was very similar to when I took out raspberries for my son. But, what were there any small wins, early on that really sort of gave you that light, that hope, even before some of the big transformations started happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I posted a couple. I went back to the Facebook page and I saw little tidbits. I would say one of the first ones was bedtime, honestly, which is kind of bizarre that we would say that. Before it was like hauling cattle, like we're going upstairs to go to bed. We're running down, we're going up. The energy level is like top notch. I mean, we do it all. Well, no TV time, no sugar before, like anything that we did, it was like we can keep the bedtime routine. And I would say at this point, we weren't like super strict on the routine, but it was like, brush your teeth, put on your pajamas. We tried visual boards, everything. And it was just like he just couldn't calm it down for the night. And it was just exhausting. And I would try, and then my husband's trying. We're both frustrated. We're walking away like 10 o'clock, and he's running the show. And my poor daughter, I would say, gets the brunt because it takes two. And now she's over here waiting for books to be read. And sometimes by the time we would get to her, she's already sleeping. So, number one would be bedtime. We noticed a lot of when we stuck to that routine and he started taking some of those supplements, we noticed like the calmness at night. And he wasn't really taking the melatonin yet. And I felt like that he was already like maybe getting like tired, or his melatonin levels were working, that he would go to bed. But I also feel like part of that came from like parasites and stuff, because he would say that after he went to the bathroom, like certain things were uncomfortable. And, I was like, well, that's where like the parasites and stuff come into play. And at night when you're calm, that's when things get active. And I felt like when things started working, I felt like he was going to bed easier and sleeping completely through the night. And he was sleeping through the night before the program, but I would say better sleep. Um, and one thing that I did notice about your son too is you talked about his eyes.
Yes. I don't know if you saw, I recently actually posted on Instagram a photo
Yep.
I came across, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my son's eyes.
You don't realize, and
Yeah.
you Google it and you ask your doctor, and they're like, lack of sleep, lack of sleep. And I'm like, it's not,
Mm.
not. So we noticed that the
The
eyes
dark
were
circles. Yes.
getting better. And I felt like maybe it's sleep, but I was like, the quality of his sleep has to be getting better. Focus, less frustration. We noticed a little bit like he wanted to read to us at night instead of we were just reading to him. And randomly he would want to read to us. I would say like we were able to like talk at the dinner table and he was actually like talking with us. We just started noticing like who he was as a person. We really didn't know him before meds. Like he started meds at 5. So now it's like a 7, 8-year old. And we were like, oh my God, who is this kid again? Learning him. And I felt like he became a little bit more easier going in the beginning. Like, I don't want to say he was like looking at us when we were talking kind of thing, but he was able to kind of keen in on being able to communicate more one-on-one and getting to his level and like understanding what I'm asking of him. There wasn't a tantrum after every ask. So it wasn't perfect, but we did notice that. And I would say our big takeaway was, I think I posted this, he had his physical with his pediatrician, and she had no clue about the emergency room. She had no clue that we stopped his meds. So we were just in for a physical, and I was scared to go in there and tell her what we were doing because I wasn't sure what she was going to say. And she had me breaking down. She was so proud of him, and she was amazed by his progress just by listening, but she could tell he was nervous, and she asked him a question. She said, "How are you feeling?" And he goes, "I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to get a shot." And she goes, "Well, guess what? We're not doing a shot today." He's like, "Okay, let's do this." And he just let go. He just let go. And I couldn't believe that he communicated that to her. He said, "I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit scared. I'm going to get a shot today." And she reassured him he wasn't. And he was like, "Okay, do everything that you need to do and let's get out of here." And he sat and he let her do it, and we got out of there. And let me tell you, the year before that, he is running around the room, pulling the paper off the thing, taking stuff out of the drawers, making balloons out of the gloves, like which kids do, and that's totally fine. But it was like he wouldn't even sit to take his blood pressure. It was just like, so for him to just, but he was still anxious. He was nervous and he had anxiety, but she was able to reassure him, and that was enough to calm him down. And I felt like this is the communication. He's starting to get it. And we felt when other people start noticing these changes, we felt like, okay, I mean, we definitely had some setbacks, but again, we stayed and we said, well, we're not done with the program yet. We still got a ways to go. We're still going to continue because not every day is going to be a perfect day, and we're still living and thriving with ADHD. So that's what we just kept telling ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, just even those little changes along the way are just so powerful. And I think that when a parent doesn't have a child that has neurodevelopmental concerns, some of the things that you're sharing about just sitting at the table and having a conversation seem so normal, so simple. But for families that are going through, that are in this journey, totally understand that's all they want. They want to be able to sit at the table. And that's so clear. And again, I feel like you are just repeating my story back to me because that one of the biggest changes that we saw, not biggest changes, one of the changes that we saw that was just such a normal thing was we could never go out for dinner without electronic devices, without, both of my boys on an iPad or whatever. The moment that we went out for dinner where we could sit around and him sit still at the table and have a conversation, that was my goal for everything. That was what I wanted to achieve. And I can tell you, we obviously got there multiple times over and over again.
Yeah.
But such a simple thing, but it's huge. It's huge when you've been going through what you've been going through. So let's fast forward where you're today. Where is he? How is he? What's the biggest change you've seen, not just in him, but also in your whole family?
So he's doing well. We ended up, when he actually went back to school, we put him in a special education classroom. I was very hesitant about that because he was going to be within a range of different children, but at the end of the day, I knew it was something that he needed. And I would say the rest of second grade, he was kind of iffy about being in there and knew that there were other children in there that had different needs, and he knew of that. And I don't think he wanted to be in there, and maybe didn't understand why. So we kind of coasted through the rest of second grade, but starting third grade, just tremendous. By the time we had his IEP meeting this past January, they started discussing implementing him back into a what do you call it? Like a, I want to
General
say like a normal
education.
classroom, but just like a
Get it? Yeah.
general ed room
Yeah.
for math because he's doing well in math. And they do think that he has the availability to go in a sensory room or calming room. So right now those needs are still there, but he asks to go. Like the other day, it wasn't a super great morning, and he went to school. And when I checked on him, I messaged his teacher and I said, we had a little bit of a struggle this morning. Let me know how he's doing. And she says he walked in and he said he wasn't having a great morning, and he asked to go to the calming room for a little while. That to me is like powerful beyond means. So he does communicate quite well. how he's feeling. Does that mean that those emotions and impulsivities don't come out? Because they do. But I feel like he's got a better control, because nobody's perfect. And like I said, and I'll continue to say that he is thriving with his ADHD. So he does have ADHD, and we're never going to change him. And I don't want to change him. But now I feel like we know who he is. And not only that, is the program actually helped my husband and I how to approach the situations that he's in. And I think that has tremendously helped. How we communicate with what he's going through sets the tone for the entire day. And if we don't approach it in the right way, it can escalate. But for the most part, um, he's communicating, he's letting us know how he feels so that we can then communicate and tell him he may not like our answer, but he understands. And that's such a big piece. And he's understanding that he's living with ADHD and what that means. And he is different in other ways, but we want him to know that that's a good different. Like everybody's different and everybody handles situations differently. Um, we're not having meltdowns at the restaurant. Not that we go out that often, but if we do, he can handle that. We went on our first big family vacation to Disney. Overwhelming, overpopulated place that I hadn't been to in over 20 years. Um, he did really great. Now, was he tired and overwhelmed? Yes, but he was able to tell us, "I'm hungry. I need a break. I can't stand in this line anymore." Just him communicating like that is like taking away all the meltdowns and tantrums. And he still has his moments, but I would say nothing compares to where we were. And I would say, I don't know, the communication in general is just like so key for us and so huge. And so we're just trying to teach him right now, like how to live with it. And you might get impulsive and you might push quicker or touch or do this because of the sensory processing. But he's still 9 and he's a boy and he's got a lot of energy. He plays travel hockey. He is thriving in that too. He loves it. He's met a lot of people. Now he's always played hockey since he's been about 5, but I feel like sports are huge. It's an all year round sport. So he's able to get his energy out all the time, being on the ice 3, 4 days a week sometimes. And that helps, I think, too, is, sometimes I would talk to Andrea about like, get him on the little trampoline, get him going. And I'm like, it's 5 degrees outside and I can't get him on the trampoline. But, getting him on the ice or doing jumping jacks or just learning things that he might need to alleviate something that might trigger him. So, we've just found ways and revenues that he needs to be able to support him. And that makes our family whole. We feel that our families notice changes and he's eating well. There's things that he wishes he can have or do that he sees all his friends doing, but he knows why. So he understands that and he advocates for himself when we're at restaurants and he'll say, "Oh, do you guys have gluten-free fries? Are they, like it's interesting to see that he's aware
Yeah.
because that's important to me. If kids don't know what they're going through or why, then it's difficult for
100%.
them."
I mean, Tiffany, to go from that state of utter chaos and that breaking point to thriving today, I mean, is just so wonderful to hear the whole story and to hear how he can advocate for himself. And I tell a lot of families in the program, like, we also have to remember they're still babies.
They're
They're still
still,
growing,
yeah.
and they're
Mhm.
still my 11-year-old. He doesn't, as use him as example all the time. He doesn't have ADHD, but he's still so active. But the fact that he, your son, you've gone on a massive vacation to Disneyland. Think back to before you started this. Could have you thought of taking him to Disneyland? Would have you even?
We've never really taken him anywhere, and we went to Disney World. Sorry.
Well, sorry.
That's okay. The same thing. We wanted to go on vacation for a long time, and we've gone to like beaches and stuff, but to like get on an airplane. And we took him when he was like a baby, but to go on these to go on a Disney, they've been asking to go to Disney for probably 3 years. And I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna be running out of the lines, and how am I gonna like keep him in a stroller? Like, what am I gonna do? Strap him down? Like, this sounds like a parent's worst nightmare, even for a child that doesn't struggle with
Yes.
some of these things. So, we did have a stroller,
Yeah.
but regardless of that, I do feel like, regardless of his age, he's 9, but let's just say intellectually probably 7,
Yeah.
but he did well. And, there were times he struggled, but I felt like he was able to communicate that. And I would have never thought that we could do that until the kids were older, and that they can kind of handle it on their own and be more independent. So it was really nice to, and that was for my 40th birthday. We decided to surprise them and go. So it was such an experience for them. And I'm glad that we were able to start doing these vacations. And I know you've been going on some vacations yourself, and it is nice to be able to go and put some of those worries away, that that there's foods for you to eat, what you can and cannot have, and that you've done your research. And sometimes that takes a little bit of more time, but it relaxes you when you go on vacation and that there's healthy things to do and places to go. And Disney was a great place because they have a lot of quiet rooms and nursing areas for moms or kids that need a break from the larger crowds. And so we really took advantage of that and was able to plan out. And so that was a really nice
Yeah, I
vacation for
again,
us.
we come back to, such a simple thing of going on a vacation. I couldn't imagine back in the day of like what that would do to my son's routine and how he would handle it and the meltdowns that would come and go.
Coming
But
back and yep.
but now, it's not even a second thought. Um, so amazing, Tiffany. For the parent that's listening who's, at their breaking point, who feels like they've tried everything and nothing has worked, what would you say to them right now?
So I guess my biggest thing is like, don't give up, because don't give up on them. It starts with you and it starts with them. Your kids cannot advocate for themselves. And we found that no one else has their best interests at heart. We had to learn the hard way, and we had to hit rock bottom. And I say rock bottom, um, for us to say we have to make a change. No one was there to support him. And we felt like, is our son going to get taken away from us? Is he never going to be happy? Is he never going to thrive? Um, Nothing is ever going to be easy. And if it was, everybody would do it. But if you're willing to put in the work, I would say it just take the first step and to try and to give it 100%. Because like I said, whatever you give, you're going to get back. And maybe not every program is the right program for you, but for us, this wasn't a diet change. This wasn't like, oh, I'm going to alleviate these 3 foods and I'm going to be fine. There's so much more to it, and there's so much more to the program that we had no idea. That was extremely eye-opening. And even for me and my husband, we feel very healthy and had the opportunity to do so much research that we felt like was healthy for our families, not just for what we're ingesting, but have taught us so much about what we put into our bodies and maybe what's in our bodies that we need to detox out. And I would say more of a natural approach versus, let's buy this supplement and see if it works. Because you can go on social media and there's a million things that'll calm a child down. Let me tell you, tried it all. But, you're willing to take any vitamin that is the magical pill, and there is not one. And for me, it was, don't give up, just whatever. If it's not working, then you have to change it, because if it's not working now, it's not going to work.
Don't give up, and if it's not working now, it's not going to work. Tiffany, thank you so much for sharing that wisdom and just going through this yourself. And it is possible. It's a new way of life. And we were talking just before you came on, before we press record, that the growth that I've seen, obviously I've been in this for a long time, but the growth that I see in the parents that come through the program and in you, it's phenomenal, and it's a phenomenal journey. And, just you look back and you think, wow, what an amazing journey. Okay, I ask every guest this. And
Okay.
I don't know if I prepped you beforehand or if you've listened to my episodes where I asked them this, but if you could just share one small actionable tip that parents can start using today, what would that be?
Yes. I know you asked this question, and it is a question that I listen to a lot of your guests because um, I always feel like every tip I'll take, and maybe it's just something that they're thinking of on hand, but um, I would say in this experience, like put yourself out there to be vulnerable. Because when you share your story with other people and these other parents on the program, you're not alone. And we felt alone for years. We didn't have anybody that we felt um, that understood our situation. We've lost friends, our family didn't understand, like your kid is, you need to get your child in order like that. It's our fault that they're acting that way. When you accept that this is going to be a lifestyle change and not a temporary fix, you release yourself from being overwhelmed and you trust that you're doing right by your child. And I would say, put yourself out there to be vulnerable, share your story and be open. My child is suffering from anxiety and ADHD, and I am trying to find ways, functional, therapeutic ways to help them. And I feel like our son has always had ADHD and anxiety, but like, I don't know how open we were about it because that label is always there. And it's almost like it was like a diagnosis that was holding him down. And now, again, we are thriving with ADHD. And I want other parents to know that this could be their ticket to being extremely successful. Use that ADHD to get to where you need to go. And I see my son now, and he is extremely smart, extremely gifted, and he has the power to do whatever he wants and to succeed. And his ADHD is going to push him to do, and he can do whatever he wants to do. And sometimes when you have that ADHD, you have that ability because when they're engaged in something and they're defiant about it, they're going to get it done. And I see that in him, and I see that even more now because he's using his availability to be able to succeed in that. So I would just say if you're going through this journey, the tip that I would have is just to put yourself out there and allow your child to thrive in whatever it is that they're struggling with.
It definitely sounds like that your son is thriving, and you have been so open and honest and vulnerable today. Tiffany, I'm so grateful that you've come on here and given so many parents out there this sense of hope and a reminder that change is possible, even when it feels completely out of reach. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure being on here with you.
It was so wonderful being on here with you. Now, listeners, if you're a parent listening to this episode and thinking, I need this kind of support too. You don't have to figure it out on your own. Head to our website, adhdthriveinstitute.com. We'll pop the link into the show notes. You can book a free call with one of our expert coaches, and we're definitely here to help you take that first step. And as always, if this episode touched you, I can tell you it definitely touched me. Please share it just with someone who needs to hear it, because, as we said, being on this journey can feel very, very alone. And if we can just touch one life, that life will touch so many others. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.